He smiled at the judge while I held the deed to every house he thought he owned, and the courtroom gasped. My name is Claire. I grew up with a stubborn pride and an instinct to fix things myself. I met Mark in Los Angeles. He was charming in that comfortable way, a man who knew the right wine, the right joke, the right promise. We married, bought a modest home in the suburbs, and I left a steady job to help him build what he called our future. We were young, hungry, and convinced we were a team. Behind Mark's easy smile was James, his business partner, who wore nicer suits and kept his distance from our dinners but stayed close to Mark's companies. I tried not to listen to the whispers at networking events, late meetings, new investors, properties changing hands. We had Nora, my younger sister, who believed in us and babysat our future plans when we needed it. Money began to arrive in ways I didn't understand. Mark said it was growth, sacrifice, leverage. I trusted him. I loved him. We were in California, but the deals spanned Texas and Florida. The house was supposed to be a safe place, not collateral for someone else's greed. That's what made the betrayal feel like a public shove, not just private, but legal, financial, and humiliating. The first crack was small, a bounced check for a contractor, explained away as cash flow. Then a whisper I overheard at a gala, Mark laughing with James about an acquisition that sounded eerily like the lot behind our home. I assumed paranoia until real notices arrived, a lien, then a demand letter. The company Mark named as our investment arm had filed against properties I'd believed were ours. When I confronted him, his eyes went blank for a second and then softened. It's temporary, he said. Signatures missing. We'll fix it. But signatures kept going missing. Friends stopped inviting me to lunches where Mark and James closed deals. I kept being told I was overreacting. My sister, who'd always defended me, was suddenly pulling away, worried about her job with Mark's partner. Things grew worse week by week. Mark stopped sleeping in our bed on some nights, returned with new cologne that smelled faintly of other neighborhoods. My messages went unread. The final blow, a weekend when I arrived at the house to find movers in the driveway. Not ours. Men with a contract from a company I'd never heard of hauling boxes with our family label. A notice taped to our front window said, pending foreclosure proceedings. Our neighbors watched. Someone from the HOA snapped a photo. The humiliation was public, a timeline photo, a whispered story. I felt small, exposed. My throat tightened in grocery lines, strangers' eyes measured me. The man I married had become my betrayer, and his accomplice had been pocketing our future for months. I nearly collapsed that night. I sat on our porch steps until dawn, thinking of every wrong detail, every paper I'd signed without reading. I almost gave up. I considered leaving, disappearing into the anonymity of a rented room, taking the grief with me. But something in me hardened. I couldn't let them make our life a rumor. I wanted justice, not just for myself but for Nora, who had mortgaged her savings to help one of Mark's ventures, and for the countless others who would never see the lie until it was too late. I started quietly. I read every invoice, every email I could access. I hired a forensic accountant under an assumed name. I learned to read corporate filings. I discovered shell companies registered in 3 states, one of which was a dead zone for transparency. Mark and James had shuffled property titles through offshore LLCs and forged personal guarantees, pretending to protect assets while draining them. The more I dug, the more reckless they became, convinced that my silence equaled consent. The plan took shape: expose the pattern, gather irrefutable documents, and force the truth into a public, legal arena where they could not hide behind smiles. I assembled proof, bank transfers with coded memos, emails showing James advising Mark to reassign title to avoid creditors, a notarized signature that didn't match mine. I found a lonely clerk at the county recorder's office who remembered a late-night filing. I found witnesses, a delivery driver who'd seen Mark with digital keys and a receptionist who archived voicemail threatening one of our contractors. There was a moment, alone in my car, when my hands shook so badly I had to stop driving. I considered giving up again. But I pictured the movers in my driveway, the neighbor's camera, Mark's empty apologies, and the image of Nora crying in our kitchen. That broke something, not me, but the last belief that I could accept being silenced. I filed a complaint and prepared a press packet. I hired a lawyer who specialized in fraud cases and court spectacles. Our first move was small but public, a FOIA request that revealed emails tying James to fraudulent valuations. We took one of the shell companies to court and demanded a temporary restraining order to freeze assets. Mark tried to laugh it off, to charm his way through media calls, but I had testimony and paper trails. The media smelled a scandal, a wife versus a handsome entrepreneur, and the cameras arrived for the preliminary hearing. The courtroom was a cold room lit like an interrogation. I remember the feel of the microphone under my fingers, the way the gallery shifted when I stood to speak. I said the facts plainly, the transfers, the forged documents, the list of investors lied to. I watched Mark's face as I spoke, his composure trembled like a mask with hidden cracks. The thumbnail moment came when I presented a stack of deeds and contracts. One by one I laid them on the judge's bench. His gaze flicked to the deed that had been quietly recorded in another county. When he realized the deed named an LLC controlled by James, his laugh died in his throat. At the public hearing, a viral photo was taken, me standing under a harsh court light, papers in hand, while Mark, formerly the golden boy at charity galas, clutched for composure as reporters swarmed. The judge froze some assets and ordered an audit. That court photo would later be the thumbnail viewers could not click away from, my eyes steady, the title deeds fanned in my hand, Mark's face in the background, furious, small, exposed. But legal war is costly. There were nights I couldn't breathe from worry, the bills, the smear attempts, James's lawyer sending threatening letters. There was a day when our bank accounts were frozen by a malicious filing and Nora called me in tears, believing we'd lost everything. I sat in my car and sobbed until my voice was hoarse. I almost signed away my case for a quick settlement just so Nora could sleep. The thought of letting them by silence nearly undid me. I didn't sign. Discovery revealed the depth of their scheme, properties transferred using forged signatures, investor funds rerouted through fake payrolls, and tax returns cooked to mask siphoned money. The evidence was undeniable. The court appointed a receiver to recover assets. James was indicted on fraud charges. Mark pleaded to a lesser tax charge but couldn't escape civil liability. Investors reclaimed funds. Our house, the one they'd tried to take by paperwork, was restored to my legal ownership. The receiver even returned some money to Nora. Mark's public fall was not dramatic in a movie way, there was no violent reckoning, but the justice was precise. He lost licenses, clients, and the charm that had been his currency. James faced criminal penalties and the shame of depositions played at council tables and in morning shows. The tabloids tried to spin sympathy for the fallen entrepreneur, but the facts were broadcast, forged deeds, deposit trails, witness statements. No one could rebuild a reputation from plastic smiles and borrowed money. I learned that revenge isn't about breaking someone, it's about restoring balance and refusing to be silenced. Standing in the small reclaimed kitchen that had once felt like ruin, I felt a complicated calm. I didn't dance on their losses, I simply closed the door on what they'd done and opened a new one to the future I would build on my terms. There is a moral punchline that surprised me. The bravest thing I did was allow myself to be visible, to be hurt, to speak, and to ask for help. The exposure I feared became my weapon. I discovered allies where I least expected them. An old client of Mark's who hated dishonesty, a journalist who wanted justice more than clicks, and the clerk at the recorder's office who testified and helped untangle a forged paper trail. Justice in my case felt quiet at the end, legal orders, return titles, and a calm Sunday morning with sunlight through the kitchen window. It was satisfying because it was true, not theatrical revenge, but the slow, inevitable undoing of a scheme built on lies. I kept the photograph of that courthouse moment pinned to a small board in my office, not as gloating, but as a reminder that I had the courage to claim my life back.
Thank you so much for watching this story on Revenge Uncut. If you felt the emotions, the twists, and the justice in this journey, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us and helps our small community grow. We're on a heartfelt mission to reach 1,000 subscribers, and with your help, we know we can get there. Stay tuned for more powerful stories. Your engagement keeps Revenge Uncut alive.